Are you curious about how to get the very best stereo imaging from your two-channel system? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Hey folks, I'm Gene Delasello with Audioholics. We got Anthony Grimani in the house. How you doing, Anthony?
I am doing well. And yourself, Gene?
Always awesome. Always awesome to have you here. So when I say two-channel imaging, I don't just mean a stereo system. I mean in a home theater system as well. As you guys know, I always make sure that I have the very best two-channel experience in whatever system I set up, whether it's 2 speakers or it's 11 speakers or more. You want to have at the very baseline a good stereo image. So what does that mean exactly, Anthony? That's what we're going to be talking about.
I like the word baseline actually that you use there, and there's a lot of different ways to think about this. One way is to think that once you're doing either regular surround sound, remember that when there was like 7 channels around you, or immersive audio when you're doing more of those, realize that what's coming out of that left and right pair is still really important in terms of quality and sound staging and imaging. And it's the same word we've always used in two-channel stereo to represent, where how cleanly the sounds are placed in the frontal soundstage. But it continues to be really important in the world of movie soundtracks or multi-channel music. And a lot of people don't actually know that the music in movie soundtracks is often just a 2-channel bed. Sometimes it's spread into 5 channels, 7 channels, more than that. But really, the music producer is thinking of what's coming out of the left and right speakers behind the screen, filling in a little bit in the center, filling in a little bit about the surrounds. But that's the actual background soundtrack is largely still left right channel dominant. And so you want to make sure that that's working fine.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the one thing that I always check for to make sure you got good imaging is to have a really strong phantom center. So you actually feel like
Right.
the center channel's on in two
Right.
channel, especially
Right.
if you're sitting between the speakers equidistant. It kind of falls off a little bit as you move over to the left or right. But I guess that's some of the things we have to talk about here is how do you get a good stereo image from a pair of
Yeah.
speakers in a room,
How do you get there? There's another thing that's interesting. If you're just thinking of a movie on its own, you could say, well, it's okay. I've got a center channel. It's all right. It's fine. But if you're like normal people where, you're flipping through channels or through apps, through different program, you'll actually find when you're sitting there and you're watching something episodic and it's cutting to a commercial or cutting to a news break, very often that is just 2 channel. And so if you go from something that's multi-channel with 3 channels across the front and the dialogue's nice and clear and the image is nice and clear because it's coming out of a center speaker, and you cut to something in which they just mix it as left and right, you want to make sure that imaging clarity, the sense that the dialogue, the voices are clearly still placed there is important. So it's not just about what happens within a movie, but what happens in your overall entertainment evening that's relevant. So how
Yeah.
do we get there? What do we do? This is not. It's funny. This is not a new requirement. This has been a requirement essentially forever and a day in the world of 2 channel, and it doesn't go away. What I'm going to talk about is the stuff that over the years of obsessing over this, I've actually found, oh, hey, if you do this and if you do that and if you do this and if you do that, chances are you'll end up with what I like to call imaging and sound staging, which I'll define in a second. And I do want to say that just like a lot of the other things I talk about, these are overall recipes. Sometimes it works really well, and then sometimes even like the best of what I'm doing with this, it's like in this room with a set of speakers at these seat positions under those conditions, it's not as good as I was hoping. But if I feel like an infomercial. If you apply these rules, you will get yourself a really nice Phantom Center, and I'd love to sell you a Phantom Center speaker for really cheap. So I will say this as an introduction. Those of you who understand what I'm talking about, actually, let me cut to what I mean by the imaging. So first, I'll define what that is, and then I'll give you a little bit of maybe a spoiler alert. So let's switch over to the sharing the show if you have that up. Imaging and soundstage. So let's go over here. Let's do that. Introduction. Well, to get there, you got to have the right program material. I haven't yet defined exactly what I mean by imaging and soundstage, but I do want to say that there's some program material out there that just doesn't have anything exciting. So in order to hear it, you want to have good program material. Next is you want to pick the right speakers and place them in the right location. Yes, I know I seem to always be harping on this. Yes, you want to treat the room with the right acoustical character to make sure it doesn't fight your speakers and then it doesn't fight your program material. And yes, you want to calibrate all this. If you're in a room in which your left and right speakers aren't equalized, aren't level balanced, aren't time balanced, you're not going to get any sound staging. So you got to do all of that. And we're going to talk about these 4 points. Now, what does that sound like? What is imaging? To me, you could sort of break it into 2 core elements. It's more than that, but in 2 core elements. One is that the sounds in the case of music or television material that's just mixed in 2-channel, the phantom center, that sense that there's a person talking here between the 2 left and right speakers is really clear. When it's working well, you swear there's a speaker there. When it's not working well, it's just kind of diffused, fuzzy sense, and that's not good. What you want to hear is the sense that there is a speaker there, but it's a phantom effect. And the phantom effect just comes from the fact that those 2 speakers are radiating towards your 2 ears. You're hearing the same sound here and here, and the same sound means the same frequencies and the same time domain. So as the waves are pushing and pulling your 2 ears, they are identical. That gives your brain the sense that there's a phantom center. How does it do that? How is it that 2 speakers placed at, maybe 45 or 50 degrees from you, firing at you, give you the sense that there's a sound in the middle? You ever thought about that, Gene?
Just the way our brains are wired to integrate the sound when it's a similar sound coming at the same delay, same level.
Right. The same way that really good dark chocolate just makes you happy.
Yeah. The problem is it tends to fall apart when you move over a couple of seats.
Yeah,
So
it will fall apart.
Yeah.
So here's what happens inside the brain. It's really a brain process. What happens is if there actually is a real speaker right here that's firing sound at you, what does it do? The waves of that speaker hit, wrap around your head and hit your 2 ear canals identically. And even if you move your head around, you kind of know, okay, I'm just, I'm bouncing around, but inside your brain, there's a set of receptors that go, hey, the actual little hairs inside your ear are firing at the same time, and there's a correlation. There's an interaural correlation. That means the sound is right in front of you. If a sound is to your left as you're standing there, that sound's going to hit your left ear first. It's going to wrap around, hit your right ear. That one's going to have a brighter spectrum than this one. And you interpret from all those small interferences that the sound's over there. It's totally crazy how quickly it works. It works in less than a millisecond in most cases. And your human beings and animals are very accurate at placing where sounds are. The stuff that's right in front of us reaches our 2 ears at the same time with the same response, the same spectral character, the same frequencies, the same time response, the same phase. And we are programmed to interpret that's right in front of me. So if you put 2 speakers offset from the center and you do the same thing to your 2 ears, you're going to go, oh yeah, that's in the middle. There is one little difference from a hard center, and that's that there's a little interference in the mid frequency that cancels out a little bit of the mid range. We talked about that in the section on dialogue.
Yeah.
Sorry?
The 2 kilohertz dip.
It's between 1.5 and 2 kilohertz, which is actually the wrong place to have a dip. We're just stuck with that because that actually is where you want the best clarity in response. That's where you really hear the plosives well or the consonants well. And that's a challenge of listening to dialogue, listening to voices out of 2 speakers in phantom center. You can actually get really clear phantom center if you follow all these recipes I'm going to give you. None of that's going to fix the fact that there's a hole in the mid-range. You'd have to compensate for that. And we call them phantom plus when we design our speakers for that. So anyway, that's a phantom center. There's another thing in imaging, which is all of the other sounds. So imagine you're listening to a jazz trio. Singer's over here. There's a piano over here, and there's a guitar over here, right? You can mix it that way. You can actually produce the material where you hear the actual singer right in the middle, and you hear a guitar over here, and you hear a piano over here. I don't know if I have the same order that I just said. That starts to be what people refer to as the sound staging. Where are the sounds placed in the stage? Not just the phantom center, but the other elements. And then you can take that mix further where you put those musicians in either for real in a room that's got some reverberation, or you do artificial reverberation by using one of the bazillions of tools that add reverb. And then that sound is fed from the two speakers with a phase randomness. And it sounds like the images go wider than the speakers, where you've got a pair of speakers over here. You hear the singer here, the piano here, the guitar here. I hope I'm keeping track of that. And then around you, you actually feel like, wow, there's a sense of a room ambience around me, even though there's just two speakers. And that's really exciting.
Mhm.
So how do
It's
you do that?
like the speakers disappear in the room. You're just listening to
Right.
music.
Ultimately, the speakers disappear. So if you want to think of you want to, what I love to do with all these things is break them down into little pieces so you can understand it. So when you have good imaging, you can hear the phantoms, the phantom center, the singer, the snare drum, the guitar, whatever is supposed to be mixed in the middle. And who decides that is the program producer, the mixer, the person who's actually making the music track. And then you may hear other instruments or singers or other things that are spread away from the middle out to the speakers and beyond, to infinity and beyond. And there are some tracks, you and I have talked about them, I think last time on Immersive Audio, this track called Queen Mary is awesome. Like where things actually spread way around you when you have good imaging. And you go, man, I don't have any surround speakers, but it's coming from all the way around me. It's really fantastic. So the speakers disappear. When it all works right, you don't hear the speakers anymore. You hear a sound stage with a phantom center, other elements, and something that wraps around you almost holographically, where you feel like, man, I feel like I can walk around this musician and actually listen to them on the side when you do it all right. So that hologram will change as you move off axis. There's no way to change that, because as you're changing the relationship between your head and where those two speakers are, one's closer to you, the other one's further away, so the whole image will shift. But if you do things the right way, if you have the right kind of speakers with the right acoustics and you tune them, it stops sounding like it collapses to one speaker. And instead, it feels like there's this music here, and you're kind of like walking around it, to where it feels like you're shifting around the hologram, which is really, really cool. I don't know if you've ever heard that, Gene,
Mm-hmm.
where it just seems like the thing, it definitely does change. It
Yeah.
doesn't stay
Yeah.
right in front of you, but you feel like you're actually walking around the stage, which is really cool. So we're going to talk about how you get there. It's so real that it's exciting. So I guess I'll admit, even though I've been, very big into surround sound for, what is it now, almost 40 years, I still really appreciate what you can do out of a pair of loudspeakers, playing good program material with good speakers, well set up, well tuned, well equalized. And you just kind of sit there and you go, wow, man, I'm just bathing in this, just with two speakers. So it all starts with good program material. If the track is mixed without a lot of imagination and everything is just kind of in the middle, sort of what I would call monophonic, where there's like really no separation, there's nothing, you're never gonna have this big soundstage. It's just all gonna be there. And just know that not everything you throw at your speakers after you've followed this recipe is gonna sound good. And in fact, what you're gonna start to notice is that now that you have the resolution to have sound staging, you'll hear the program material that was mixed really boring, or really old, where it was in mono and there's nothing you can do about it, versus the stuff that was like really, really interestingly done.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then some music tracks sounds like in two channel sound like you have an immersive audio system. And I've talked about those in a few of these talks. So next thing, so choose the right program material, right? Or else you're not getting anything. Next thing is the speakers. You got to have good speakers. What's a good speaker? What does that mean? I bought good speakers. They were expensive. Well, this is a slide I put up very often in my talks, which is what makes a good speaker. A good speaker is one that good produces a bubble of sound that goes out to all of the seats, all of the surfaces, all the areas of the room, that's kind of equal, whether the speaker is radiating to you or past you, bouncing off a wall over there, or past you or to the side of you to your friend that's sitting with you, where the sound bubble is constant over a pretty wide range. It used to be thought that to get good imaging, you really wanted to collapse the sound so it's like really almost anechoic and all of this stuff. But that's not really as enjoyable as when you have a speaker system that's got really good wide sound power in a room that's properly adjusted and properly tuned. It just works better. So in order to have good sound power, you have to have smooth direct sound. So the sound that's going straight in front of the speaker needs to have equal frequency response, as in the acoustic output at all different frequencies is constant if you have the same voltage. But also the off-axis response out to at least 40 to 45, preferably even more all the way to 60, needs to be smooth. It can change a little bit, but no radical changes. And I know, Gene, you've talked about this a lot in your live streams. I've talked about it a lot. We can refer back to other ones in these series. Now, it's good to have a speaker with low distortion, because if you're sitting there listening to a soundstage and in the middle of that piano is overloading and sounding bad, you're going to be like, I'm not in this music anymore. It's good to have a speaker system that can handle the sound level capacity of what you're trying to do. Noting, I was talking about piano, a grand piano slammed like really hard. You know what the peak level of that is at normal seating distance if you're in front of a 6 or 7 foot grand?
Oh, I would imagine it's got to be over 100 dB, no?
It's 120.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
you hit a big chord, kablamo, and it's a short peak of 120. It's not going to hurt your ears, but if your speakers are overloading or your amps are going, suddenly you're like, yeah, well, whatever. I was listening to this, but suddenly I'm out of the music.
Well, I noticed that with brass instruments, when a speaker compresses, I'm very sensitive to that because of the mid range.
Yeah. Yeah, the brass hits all these overtones that are just kind of a little disturbing.
Yeah, jarring. Yeah.
And then there's this thing that's very difficult to express in measurements, which is the net phase response of the speaker. I've been working on this a lot in some committees in CEDIA, which is like, how do we measure and disclose the phase response of a speaker so that you understand what it's doing over frequency? Is it relatively linear with phase? Does it change a lot? And really importantly, whether if you can make a speaker that's the left speaker and the right speaker, did they have the same phase response? I'll explain this a little bit more, but these are things that matter in describing a good speaker. So those are the elements I like to think about. So you want a good speaker, and a good speaker is one in which you have all good elements on that, but also so that what you bought out of the manufacturer, the left and right speakers, are a nice matching pair. And I know our friends at Revel spend a bunch of time worrying about that, right? Where they do tweaks to the speaker to match the pair. But if there's differences between the two speakers, even though you've placed them correctly, if there's differences, your two ears are not hearing quite the same sound, and so then it's harder to be convinced that there's a phantom image over here and all these staged elements. So you want a pair of speakers that are well matched.
Yeah, I can tell you, I know, like I talked to Perlison about that a lot, and they are really tight tolerant parts. And they get it down to like a 10 on their LE versions. They get it down to a 1/10 of a dB matching.
Right.
It makes a big difference. It really does.
And that matching in the parts is the drivers, which are remarkably good these days. I mean, we make
the
speakers.
Crossover parts.
Well, first the drivers. And so we buy drivers from different manufacturers. Some of them are sloppy. Some of them are good. Hey, surprise, surprise. The more expensive ones are consistent. You can measure them one after the other and they look like it's the same line overlapping. So you got to start with good drivers that are made to tight tolerances. Those are expensive, and that means the speaker is more expensive, right? You can buy a woofer for $5, or you can buy one for $50. You can buy one for $250 or $500, all in a 6.5-inch woofer. Well, the more expensive one's going to drive the retail price of the speaker up, but it's going to be more consistent with lower distortion and better frequency response. Is really No two ways about it.
Mhm.
And then there's the crossover circuit, the thing that separates the signals that go to the tweeter and the woofer, or the tweeter, mid-range, and woofer. And those parts need to be very well matched, and that's expensive. That's also something that will drift over time. So if you're buying used speakers, you don't really know if a pair that started off matched is still matching. Uh, I'm going to be funny. We cheat our way around that. We just build the crossovers in the active digital domain, so we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
And then things just stay the way they have to be. So you got to match what those two speakers are doing as their sound is going to your two ears and is pushing and pulling the air so that they're consistent between the two ears, and therefore mimicking what would happen if you had an actual solo center speaker, but out of those two. So the speakers have to match. Their placement in the room needs to be such that the way they're pushing and pulling air across frequencies gets to your ear the same way. The treatments that you're going to put around the room need to be the right ones, and there's some counterintuitive information there. And then finally, there's some treatments.
Notice the equal distance between the speakers and the sidewalls, similar acoustic treatments. It was no coincidence that I did that.
Yeah. So that's a picture of Gene's room with his little miniature speakers for left and rights. And then you want to tune and equalize those so that, again, all of the frequencies that are going to your ear are all equally tempered, and that they're all smooth the same way, and that your two ears are getting the same kind of sound. But you also want to match the time response, and this is a little more complicated. So frequency response just means that as you put in a frequency into the speaker, it's putting out the acoustic energy to your ear here and your ear there with the two speakers. That's the same. That's called frequency response. But then there's this thing that's also really important that is a necessary correlation of frequency, which is the time. So the speakers are pushing and pulling air at different frequencies, and that air that's pushing and pulling is eventually getting to your two ears, and you want the way that speaker and this speaker is pushing and pulling air to reach your two ears exactly identically if they left identically. If they left on purpose out of phase, because that's how the program was produced with maybe 90-degree phase shift or 180 phase shift, you want that to reach your ear exactly as it left. And that's a little harder to get consistent. A very slight error in frequency response will lead to a big error in time response. Those things are related by a mathematical expression that's known as the Fourier transform. You can go look at it. But whatever's happening in the frequency domain can then be converted and explained mathematically in the time domain. So if there's errors in the frequency response, there's going to be errors in the time response. But also there could be errors in the time response that come from not placing your speakers exactly equidistant, or that come from how the right speaker bounces off a wall and the left speaker bounces off a wall. Could come from the aiming of the speakers, could come from lots of different things, and you want to match that. So you want to start with a pair of speakers that's well matched in frequency and time, and you want to place them so that the time is preserved, and the treatments you want to put, you want them to preserve the effect of that time, and then you want to equalize that. And we'll talk about how you tune the equalization of the time domain. And then there's this question of in picking the speakers about the directivity, high or low directivity. So this is an age-old debate. Like, hey, a speaker with higher directivity, one that beams the sound more at you is going to give you better imaging because it's more anechoic. No. A speaker that's like wider is going to be more realistic. Yes, no. And it sort of reminds me of the taste great, less filling argument, or the half dozen or 1/6 of the other. And the prevailing thinking right now is a speaker with constant directivity. What's more important than how directional it is that it actually have a smooth and continuous radiation across frequencies in the room is really, really important. So if you're going to introduce some focused directivity, it better be all the way down to 200 or 250 hertz, or else as it's changing its directivity, the room is going to affect the imaging. So Depending on the room and how big the room is, there's a certain amount of directivity you want or don't want. But I've actually now gotten used to listening to speakers with a really wide and constant horizontal coverage, a little bit of focus vertically, and in which the walls are either far enough or they're treated so that they're not quite so prevalent. And the sound staging is unbelievably real from that. It doesn't sound like boxes. It sounds like the music is just floating there and you just don't hear the speakers anymore. So, um, the placement of those speakers is important. You there's no way there is one way about it, but you basically want to sit at the tip of a triangle, right? Somebody says constant directivity equals greater ability to EQ. Absolutely.
Yep.
If the directivity is changing a lot with frequency, you can start chasing your tail and trying to equalize that. I'm going to get to that soon. So the the placement of the speakers, this I'm hopefully not teaching you anything new. You want to be at the tip of a triangle. I'm finding that generally an overall triangle of 45 degrees, 50 degrees at the biggest, not 60 like
Yeah.
some studios do, works better.
Yeah, I don't like the speakers too wide apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have really good acoustic control of the room and really good control of the response of the speaker, you can get away with a 60-degree angle and still have a pretty good imaging. It's harder and harder. Somewhere 45 to 50 works well. What's interesting is that also happens to coincide with the placement of speakers in mixed rooms for movies. So if you go to a dubbing stage, a place where they're making movies, and you look at where they put their speakers, they're usually 45 degrees plus and minus 22 and a half, and that's good. That works really, really well. Now, if the speakers are close to the side walls where there's really strong reflections right there, you're going to end up with comb filters. You're going to end up with some disturbances in the frequency response that are going to just result in a fuzzy soundstage. It's just not going to be clear. So if you can choose locations in a room where the walls are further away, or if they're not further away, you want to absorb or scatter those sounds so that they're not too prevalent. That's important. Um, and then subwoofers can help. How does a subwoofer help in imaging? What's
Well,
the subwoofer doing for imaging?
one thing, you could base manage the speakers.
Yep.
Secondly, you could put the subs in the ideal locations in the room to smooth out the bass response.
Right.
So that's going to improve your imaging right there, just getting rid of the bloat or unevenness in
Right.
bass.
Exactly. So that's Murphy's law applies to speakers. Wherever the pair of speakers is going to give you a really nice mid-frequency image, like oh, I can hear Diana Krall singing right over there, is where her bass player is going to sound like he's playing out of a tub instead of a wood stand-up bass. And I'm only slightly joking that you can't get the bass to be right as you I think hopefully you all have heard that as you move the speakers around, the bass changes, and there's a place where you put the speakers in the room and the bass is just right. But chances are that's a place where the imaging won't be right, because
Mhm.
you can't, Murphy's always watching. And so if you break those things up where you go, look, I'm going to take my speakers down to 80 or 90 hertz, and then I'm going to cross them over very carefully to subwoofers with the proper filters, well equalized, well tuned, so that I can now put my subwoofers where they work well in the room, where they produce an energy below 80 hertz that's not bloated. But then you can put your speakers where they need to be, so the mid bass all the way up to high frequencies gives you a nice image. Now you don't have to compromise between bass performance and imaging. And that's why I am a big fan of subwoofers. Sometimes, if you're lucky, the subwoofers live right under your quote unquote satellite speakers, because Murphy wasn't watching. Murphy will catch you somewhere else.
Or right behind it, you get rid of speaker boundary interference
Yeah,
issues
yeah.
up against the
So,
walls. Yeah.
but most times I would prefer to have smaller speakers with subwoofers than a big full range speaker, just because it's just easier to manage.
Yeah, it
So,
is. Sure.
it does mean you have to have proper crossovers, proper understanding of how to do it, proper equalization. I'll get to that. So, the other thing that you need to think about is what I like to call acoustical tuning, which is how are you tuning the environment around your speakers so that their direct sound, which is you can think of the anechoic part, and the reflected sounds are all helping each other rather than fight each other. And I've certainly talked about this before in some of these talks, right? Um, but you really want to realize how important the treatments are, not just to dialogue clarity and the ability to hear where sounds are panning around you, but they're also really, really important in imaging and sound staging. So the right acoustical treatments, the right number of absorbers, the right number of diffusers, all placed at the right locations in the room will help you in the process of enhancing your imaging. So I've been into plenty of rooms over the years where you got a very nice pair of speakers. They're placed down there. There's no acoustics, anything. And you're hearing the music, but it's bloated. You don't hear any distinction between the elements. You have this sort of wash of sound. And some people go, "Wow, isn't that nice? I have this wash of sound." It's like, it's nice, but when I keep talking about Diana Krall, when she's singing, I can't really tell that she's there. She sounds like she's as big as the piano. And then you treat the room, equalize the speakers, and suddenly you have that character and resolution of the spatial performance, like where all the musicians are clearly located where they're supposed to be, and that's really exciting. That feels like, man, I've got an orchestra in front of me. So that's where you want to treat it. If you do too much absorption and too much diffusion, that falls apart. There's just the right amount. So um, so let's see. You've seen this before. This is a very quick recipe. This is a rehash. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but this is an
Yeah, there's a
example.
playlist with all these other
Right,
videos if you want to look at the
right.
acoustic
So
stuff.
some amount of absorbers, some amount of diffusers on both walls, on the back, all done. But what I really like to think of is that when it all works right, you have a direct sound from the speaker, and then you have reflections from the room that's supported with this even crescent of energy. And instead of being slaps from all the different locations in the room, you still have energy, but it's just distributed evenly. And then your mind can just focus on what's coming from those speakers and not be distracted by too much reflection or too little reflection. Okay, I just want to insist, just like salt, there's the right amount. Too little and the food is bland, too much and all you taste is salt, and then you're going to end up with, high blood pressure, which is bad. So, next thing you got to do to make all this work is calibrate. Okay, I don't care how good your speakers are, how good your amps are, how good your wires are. And I know, Gene, you really love really good wires.
Oh, I
I
love
don't.
them.
You love them. I don't
Yeah.
care how good all of that is. You're going to put that speaker in a room, and the room is going to act as another enclosure around the speaker. It's going to change the sound of the speaker, and you got to tune it. And so, what this says is the room will also always affect the response. You got to equalize the two speakers so that they're both smooth response, and so
Yeah.
they're both the same. It's
Give
in
you an
this case,
example. Give you an example. This is my family room.
right?
Left the right speakers at the main listening position, and
Right.
that was just a little bit of EQing with Odyssey, doing some
Right.
manual. That's very consistent, and each
Right.
speaker is consistent no matter where I sit, and improves the imaging as a result.
Right. If you can put that back up real quick.
Sure.
So you'll see some differences here at 150 hertz, which is room conditions. That's not where imaging is.
Right.
The character of imaging, I don't know if my mouse isn't working now, but really where imaging effects really start, I like to think about 250 and 300 hertz up to about 3 kilohertz. And in that region, your match is measured very well.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a pair of speakers that produces a wonderful soundstage and great phantom centers, right?
Yep.
So how do you equalize those? Well, it's a combination of parametric EQ plus mic or microphones plus time to do it and some experience of playing around with it, listening to it, tuning, going, okay, I see this response. Does it sound the same? I like to get to a point where I've got a chart like you have where they look the same. And then I listen to pink noise in the left and then the right and the left and the right. Does it even sound the same? And sometimes you can have the chart be completely identical and the right sounds a little brighter.
Mhm.
Or the left sounds a little brighter. And if one of the two speakers sounds a little brighter, it's a little more upper mid range, what your ears are hearing is different. And so the amplitude response or the frequency response is going to be different. The time response is going to be different. And now you need to give yourself permission to go tune that manually until those two sound the same. Okay, that's frequency response. You got to level match it. You got to tonally match it. There's also time response, which is just like you need to have the two match, you need the time. Again, I already said this, and this is a really difficult thing to analyze and measure. So you do definitely want the two speakers to hit your two ears, all the frequencies that are not always lined up in phase, but relative. They need to be the same. You want them to match. And There is a way to measure that with REW, by the way. You can do what's called an impulse response at your, one microphone position right where you're sitting. And then you go to the overlay mode and you press what's called step function. And that'll show you how the speakers behave in the time domain. If the left and rights are well matched, you'll actually see the curve match. It doesn't matter what the curve looks like. Actually, it goes in that direction from your left to your right. What matters is that they both look the same. And the way you're going to hear that, I have this little trick. So I like to use all pass filters to fix the problem, but the way I like to listen to it is I play pink noise out of the two speakers, left and right speakers together, and you should hear a phantom center. Cool. And then you flip the polarity of one of the speakers. You either do that by reaching around the back of the speaker and flipping the wires, the red and black, or if you have a digital EQ of some sorts, you just go and tell it change the polarity. Or you have a test signal that can flip the polarity, like Room EQ Wizard. When you're playing pink noise out of left and right, there's a little button that says invert second output, I think is what it's called. And then suddenly what should start from a solid phantom image of pink noise that sounds like there's a speaker in front of you, even though you're not listening to it. When you flip polarity, it should all go away. And invariably, you're going to end up with some region of frequency that stays there, like a little that's still there. Where does that come from? It comes from a phase rotation in one of the two speakers that doesn't match. And it's the result of the speaker, the room, the treatments, who knows. It could be a bazillion different things. What you want to do is fix it. So then what I do is I take an all-pass filter that's available in the better EQs.
Storm just added that in their latest firmware, Storm
Thank
Audio.
you, Storm. I've been asking for that for a while. So you take that all-pass filter and you slide it from either highest frequency to low frequency or low frequency to high frequency. And as you slide it, you're actually going to hear sounds that were originally gone coming into the middle. And then you're finally going to get to that thing that was staying there that suddenly, like imagine it sounded like you slide the filter right to that region of frequency, maybe a third of an octave, and suddenly it disappears. It goes away with everything else. Now what you've done is you've taken an out of polarity signal. It's supposed to be a complete hole in the middle, and you've ensured it as a hole in the middle. And then you flip the polarity back of that speaker. You reach around the back and change the wires back, whatever you got to do that. And then you listen to that all pass filter on and off, and you'll hear the image going from here to here without the all pass filter to here with the all pass filter. And it's uncanny. And suddenly your singers, your guitarists, your snare drums, everything becomes really clear in the middle. And all of the other sound staging becomes clear. It's kind of a nice little trick. And then you want to ask, how come there's no machine that does this? Well, when you're doing Odyssey, when you're doing Dirac, it's trying to match the impulse response, which is an analytical way to do this. But I found it never does it exactly the way human beings hear, because we have this thing here called a brain that interacts psychoacoustically with the first sound and the second arriving sound and the third and the fourth and fifth arriving sound in a different way than a microphone. And right around there, somebody's going to go, yeah, but Anthony, the way you're going to hear it is different than what Gene hears. It's like, nope. Gene and I have been in a room together, or I've been in a room together with many other people listening to that same effect. And I sit them down and I go, do you hear this? Great. I'm going to turn the all-pass filter on and off. Do you hear it also? Do you hear the imaging going away, or that like remaining little area at, I don't know, 800 hertz going away when I hit suspense? Like, oh, yeah. So I don't understand, because really your head and ears are different than my head and ears. We have a different age. We have different experience. Yeah. We have different, all of this, we're not brothers from another mother. We're not twins, but we will still hear it the same way. And really what it comes down to is from the time we're a baby, we're listening for where images are. We build knowledge in our brain about where things are. And when they don't match intraorally at the 2 years, we go, something's wrong.
It's like your head-related transfer function, basically.
Right. It's the time domain part of that. Right. So this is pretty critical to that sense of imaging. And I've done tons and tons of calibrations where that's sort of the last phase.
And you're not just talking about doing it to the main speakers. You do it to every speaker group.
Right. And
It
so
takes a long time.
our next session is about how do you do this between the left and side left and all the way around. We'll talk about that later, but that's an important thing. So frequency response calibration, really, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. You can use a real-time analyzer, impulse response transfer function. You do want to use spatial averaging, which is that you want to put a bunch of microphones or microphone locations in the room. You want to have at least 12th octave resolution. And in the case of Room EQ Wizard, you can actually do a smoothing function called psychoacoustic smoothing that doesn't show you all kinds of crazy peaks and dips that you don't hear, but instead models what you do hear. Because you don't hear everything that an analyzer is going to display, and you could be chasing your tail, wasting your time. So you want to optimize that first through placement and room treatment, and then equalize electronically. So I do want to bring this up. How are we doing on time, Gene?
We're 40 minutes, so we probably should wrap
40
it up
minutes.
in the next 5 or 6. Yeah.
So let me bring this up. There's people who go, no, equalizers, yeah, you can move the speakers around, you can do all this stuff, it's all great, but no equalizers. Equalizers screw up the phase response. Yes, they do. You're correct. But whatever's an error in the amplitude response
Yeah.
of your speakers is also mostly, I shouldn't say invariably, but mostly going to result in a phase response, just because there's a correlation, what's called a minimum phase correlation between the amplitude and time response. And if you had a case of a 12 dB peak in a speaker that was in a system, that would be absolutely horrible. There's also this phase response that's shown here as the phase response is in the red line. So this is just a straight mathematical relationship between the amplitude response and phase response. And if you introduce, my animation's not working. Sorry. If you introduce an equal but opposite amplitude response, also known as frequency response, the phase response is going to go exactly in the inverse. So whatever's happening acoustically in the room is going to affect your phase response, and the equalizer you're introducing will flip that back to where the phase response is linearized. So don't worry about it. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. This is the way I like to do it. I like to show up with 4 microphones, plug them into what's called a multiplexer, which is a box that switches between the 4 microphones, and I can analyze, look at every microphone. I can have it free running between the 4 mics and do a temporal average. It's hard to buy a multiplexer anymore, but you can use a USB interface that has 4 microphone inputs. There's a bunch of different ways to do that. We've already talked a little bit about this on the session several years ago. We can talk again about it. Now, okay. So we've talked about picking the right program material. We've talked about picking the right speakers, putting them in the right place, and doing some acoustical control of the room. And for more info on that, go back to the sessions where we talk about how many do you want. Usually the recipe is 15 to 20% of absorbers, another 15% of diffusers, and you'll get there. Want to remind you that essentially what pays for me to be able to take the time to do this conversation is a line of products we sell under the brand Sonatus, where we've got a bunch of different absorber choices. This is the legato absorber, a curved surface that's a dense polyester foam that's flocked with a velvet coating, really pretty. It's available in black, gray, or white. We have this really cool new absorber called the WaveX absorber that doesn't fit. It won't fit in a really classical environment, but in something a little more interesting and edgy, it looks really cool in the wall. This is what they can look like when you put them on there. They're largely a good deep absorber. We have this thing called the Quadzorber that's very cost effective, works really well over a broad range of frequencies. We have this thing called a canvas absorber, which is a 2x4 panel covered in a fabric, which is why we call it canvas. It's available in black or white. And then we also have these interesting devices that are kind of mid-frequency absorbers. So if you don't want to overtreat your highs because you want to maintain the liveliness of in the room, if you take a room that's got carpeting and a lot of furnishings and stuff, the high frequency is already very, very damped. And if you put more high frequency damping in there, the imaging can suffer. So we make a range of these products that just absorb the mids and low mids and then reflect back the high frequency with a little scattering, called the Decozorbers, and they come in different colors and shapes and styles. So we also make a set of products called scattering devices, diffusers. We have this thing called a four-fuser that you use towards the front side walls of the room. And we have the big fusor. I love saying that, big fusor, which you put towards the back of the room. And Gene, you've got some
The ceiling.
in
Yeah.
your own room.
Yep. Yeah,
There's
and I
two.
put links. There's links to all these in the video description if anybody's interested.
So they come in different shapes, different colors. You know, they all behave about the same. Choose the one that you like. They also come in solid wood. They weigh about 50 pounds each in solid wood. Work a little bit better than the synthetic materials, but there's of course a price for that. And we finally have these combination products that are absorbers and scattering devices all in one that allow to control those reflections in the room so that the room is not fighting your speakers. It's just, I always come back to that. It's like you want to hear the sound leaving your speakers. You want some amount of reflections, but you don't want so many that they're fighting they're fighting for attention from your ear brain, or that it's so over absorbed that you're like, why is this so anechoic? You know, when I should say this, when it's over anechoic, you move your head very slightly and the whole image falls apart.
Yeah.
Because you're only listening to the perfect correlation between 2 points with nothing in the room to support it. So you just want the right amount, not too many. So this is one of the combination products we use that absorbs and scatters a little bit. And then there's other really cool product called the Archwood, which is this 2x4 panel with a curved surface that absorbs mids and kind of mids up to upper mids and then scatters the rest. It's very cool looking. There you go. So those are the products we have to help with these items. I wanted to cover this one more thing really quickly.
Man, it's funny that you mentioned that. I've been in overtreated rooms, and you could hear speaker problems more in those kind of rooms.
Right.
Than you can when the room scatters the sound more.
Right.
It masks it. Yeah.
So these are examples of what this all looks like in a room. So this, in full disclosure, is Gene de la Sala's room. That's got a combination of absorbers and diffusers. Whether it's ours or not, what I want you to notice is it's a few. It's not so many that the room is just covered with them.
Yeah.
And there are some manufacturers that sell acoustic materials. They want you to do the whole room. They make more money, but what it does is you suffer from it. You start to hear speaker problems. So just a few, just the right number in the right place. This is another room that's close to where I am here. This sounds glorious. Look at that. It's pretty sparse. It's like spices in your food. You just want to have the right amount, not too much, not too little. This is another room, a little bit more treated. This is another room, pretty sparse. I know it looks like it's a lot, but if you look carefully at the surface amount versus treatment amount, it's pretty sparse. There's another room. Whether you like the style or not, that's not the point. The point is you want to put a few on there. You want to put them in the right place. For a discussion about the right place, go look at the other live streams we've done.
We got tons. Yeah.
A review, imaging and soundstage. It starts with the right material. Don't imagine that something that's poorly recorded is going to give you this glorious 3-dimensional holographic soundstage.
Yeah, you're not going to get that from Metallica Black. I'm sorry, guys.
I say nothing. And then you want to have good speakers, which doesn't mean crazy expensive speakers, but speakers that are well matched, that have a good dispersion, that you can equalize, that don't have distortion, that have enough dynamic range, and then maybe some things that are smaller so that they're easier to move around in place, with subwoofers that are all well spliced, all well done, all well crossed over, so you can match the bass to the room and match the speakers to the imaging of the room. That's my favorite recipe. You want to place them all in the right location. You want to have the right treatments, and you want to calibrate it. Calibrate in the frequency, in the level sequence, and in the time domain. Once you do all that, you're going to end up with something really fantastic. I always like to put this up too in the end, which is, you want to read more about this. There's some really amazing books written on all this topic.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at those. Master Handbook of Acoustics. These are great resources. This book, if you're going to read just one book, read this one by Dr. Floyd Toole called Sound Reproduction. I guess he might be at the 4th edition. I forget now.
Yeah,
do you remember, Gene?
A couple of years ago, he had a newer edition.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. I got to update the slide. This is old. Yeah. Anyway, so just look at the book, Sound Reproduction by Floyd Toole. He covers the topics of acoustics and speakers and placement and all this stuff, all in a pretty big book. Good vacation reading. So All right, that's it that I wanted to talk about here. Um, and any questions, Gene?
No, I mean, I think we covered it. Look, the bottom line is when it's all said and done is it's got to create magic when you sit down and listen, right? I mean, it's
Right,
got to convince you that you're not listening to speakers. It's got to convince you that you're in the space that
right,
you're listening to. The
right.
speaker should disappear. You should have that strong phantom center, and you should have good bass response,
Yeah,
and hopefully across all your seats, not just one or two seats.
right.
So
Yep.
really, you're advocating for a 2.1 system at the very minimum.
Yeah. 2.2 would be better because it's
Yeah,
really hard to place a single subwoofer to where its
exactly.
interaction with the room is all idealized. If you can't do anything else, it's still better than that. Although you could argue that two full range speakers are going to have potentially less room interactions, or they're going to fight some of the room interactions compared to a single. My preference would be 2.1 or, excuse me, 2.2 or 2.4 for smaller subwoofers, right?
Yeah.
One big behemoth, four smaller ones that you place in the four corners of the room and you tune, like I've talked about in the webinars on bass management.
Yeah, and if you can't do four subs, I've had excellent luck with a pair of bookshelf speakers on stands and then the subs right behind them against the walls.
Yeah.
You know, you could do a lot of good with that.
Yep.
So, last thing, why are so many people? Oh, wait, I hit the wrong one. Sorry. Why are so many people afraid of subs? I think they're afraid of subs because most people haven't heard good sub integration with their speakers. So they think
Yeah.
it's going to sound slow. It's going to be,
I,
boomy.
I would love to do, half an hour, 40 minutes. That's just call that, why are people afraid of subs? It's just that they're misused.
Yes.
Um, I think there's plenty of examples of things in life where people get whatever it is, where, and they just overuse it and then it doesn't work. They're always turned up too loud. They're not spliced correctly into the speakers. The actual time response of the speaker and the subwoofer is not aligned so that they don't, at this low frequency, they push and pull air the wrong way. Um, I think of a subwoofer as taking a three-way speaker and adding a fourth way, or a two-way speaker and
Yeah.
turning it into a three-way speaker. And
Well, look
so,
at this example I did here. I mean, obviously these are expensive towers, but I would say you could do the same thing with a pair of bookshelves. I've got in-wall subs in this room. You don't
right,
even see the subs; they're behind the
right,
speakers, and it
right.
just worked out that they're in good locations because the bass is even no matter where I sit in the room.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
I
that's the
got lucky.
philosophy. A subwoofer should not be a thing that makes the bass louder, but a thing that takes over at some point from your speakers so as to just enhance the bass quality in the room. I have done this one thing though once in a while. Two full range speakers, big problem at the seat position because Murphy's Law says that there's a giant hole, and you put two small subwoofers at the back of the room,
Yeah,
and you run the front speakers full range, and then at 100 hertz and below you engage the
yep,
subwoofers. You retune the front speakers so that their bass is tapered down so you don't end up with too much bass,
yep,
and you time align this whole thing to where the bass is even through the whole room. You can do that very successfully with a 2.2 system.
sure, yep.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's a
Cool.
wrap, Anthony. I appreciate you dropping the knowledge. Guys, if you like this video, please hit the thumb up, hit subscribe. Check out the links down below. Grimani's got some consultation links. He's got links for his acoustic products. In fact, even on your website, it shows, how many products you would need to size of the room. You've got a lot of tools there that really can help people. So, guys, check that out. And if you like this video, please hit the thumb up. Don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/Audioholics. We appreciate your support. And until next time, my friends, keep listening.